want to remember going forward is that we are at a very unique time historically. I'm going to move that a bit closer to my mouth. Better? There we go. When you look now and you stand as somebody who's running a small business, the era of the 5-year plan is basically a joke. It's effectively dead. If you think about 2 years ago, you probably weren't thinking a lot about Twitter. You probably weren't thinking that much about Facebook. And in truth, Groupon was probably somewhat unknown to you 2 years ago. So much will change in the next 12 to 24 months that it's probably best and brightest to take your time to look only at the next 365 days. That's pretty much about the visibility you're going to have into change, both technologically, customer change, macroeconomic change. The whole era that we were trained into around 5-year plans really truly is dead. So what I wanted to do was sort of give you a bit of a window into where I think your life is going to be, where your business is going to be, and where you will likely be spending your time simply as a human being over the next 365 days. Now, that is a fork in the road. We have actually hit this incredible fork in the road as human beings. We're at this place now where if you stand on the one, if you're in the middle, forget about being a business person, forget about being somebody who's interested in media or technology. Just think about yourself as a person, as a parent, as a friend. On the one hand, you stand and you look at this enormous financial change that's gone on in the last 2 years. In 2008, we witnessed arguably what was probably the worst financial meltdown since the Depression, if not worse than the Depression itself. You stand at that road and you look down another path and you see incredible environmental change. So we are now, as you know, standing at a point in time where the Earth's core temperature is the hottest it's been since the melting of the polar ice caps. About a year ago, a piece of the North Pole actually broke off the size of Manhattan, one of the biggest breakages we have seen ever historically in recorded history. So you've got this incredible amount of change happening in our planet. Then you look a little bit more to the right, and you see incredible technological change. And not just technological in the sense of just bits and bytes, but actual information change. So we have now statistically produced more data as human beings and more information in the last 3 years, 36 months, than we did in the prior 5,000. That rate will continue to double over a period of time over the next 5 years. So we will inevitably produce more data in a period of 2 months than we will in the preceding 4,000 to 5,000 years. Then you take a look just one more bit to the right at this fork in the road, and you will see incredible demographic change. So all of a sudden, we went from being somewhat predictable, the age brackets being somewhat alike, generally speaking, in a behavioral sense, to having enormous swelling at both ends of the pendulum of demographics. So on the one hand, you have the graduation, so to speak, of the baby boom. And then you have, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, Gen Ys and millennials, who for many of you that have kids in that age demographic know they are complete and utter aliens. But the truth is, completely the same in some respects, in terms of the values that they share, and in other respects they are unidentifiable to one another. So you stand as a human being at this fork in the road, you see this huge financial change, enormous environmental change, huge information and technology overload, incredible shifts in who we are as people demographically, and it is really easy to understand why we are confused. I'm allowed to show this here, by the way. I actually live in the States now, so I don't get to bring this out as often as I would like, but here we go, for your Canadian pleasure. But it is easy to figure out why people are confused. This is an incredible, if you weren't confused living in 2011, you wouldn't be living in 2011. This is an incredibly complicated time in history, one that's quite distinct and unique compared to any other place we've been to as human beings before. And what I want to do to that end this morning is walk you through a little bit of historical context. I think it is very, very poor form when people don't spend time thinking about where we've been in order to understand where we are. You just can't do it. And when it comes to the web and it comes to social media or it comes to sheer macroeconomics, the historical context of how we got here is really, really important to understanding what you do from this day forward. The other thing I want to do is talk about human behavior. Human behavior is a very, very traditionally static thing. For about 4,000 years, human beings changed very little in their behavior. There were some exceptions to that. There were some blips on the radar. You would have, for example, during the advent of television, there was slight changes in human behavior, meaning what you did after dinner, but not that much. Traditionally, what happened for about a 4,000-year period was institutions would drive human behavior. So governments would drive human behavior. Education, systems, and eras would drive behavior. Most of the behavior that you are now governed by, whether it's the education system, how we govern ourselves through democracy, how you get a promotion at work when you move from grade 1 to grade 2, is governed by the Industrial Revolution. That revolution dictates much of the standard. In fact, you can thank Henry Ford for the most part. The concept of standardization was really, really put in place in the Industrial Revolution based on concepts of what we wanted human behavior to be. What happened, arguably, in the last 15 years of the commercialized internet is human behavior has changed more than at any other point in human history. And it's important, I think, going forward to understand that all of this, all of the discussions about technology are irrelevant. Because there's always been really good enabling technology that allows people to do what they want to do. The question was, people weren't using it, and why? A lot of the stuff, in fact, today, if you take a look at companies that are quite successful today, in 90% of the cases, they are Me Too businesses. They are businesses that existed well long ago, 10, 15 years ago. Groupon is a great example of that, by the way. Groupon is a 10-year-old concept that started out of a company in Seattle called Mercata in the 1990s. Paul Allen spent about $90 million trying to prove that Groupon would work. The problem wasn't the technology or the model. It was around human behavior and the willingness and ability to adopt that change. So I want to walk you through what I think is the most important thing to know in the next 365 days, which is the changes in human currency that have gone on, which make us completely different people than we were 15 years ago. I also want to talk to you a little bit about where we're going. As small business, I always hated the term small business, to be honest, but as entrepreneurs, as people who are running companies, what I think you need to pay attention to over the next 365 days, things that are going to be really important in not only running your business, but in just being here, being present, living in this world every day. Then I'll talk a little bit about how you prepare for those 365 days, and I think we'll have enough time, we'll get to questions that I will be able to show you my bar mitzvah video. And here's a little preview. Look at that. Stefan, do you see that? It's me becoming a man before your very eyes at the age of 13. I still have that suit, by the way. So let's get started. Let me talk for a minute about social media, and really social media is just a ruse for the internet generally. So I think, quite frankly, terms like social media and Web 2.0 and Web 3.0, all of this stuff is just garbage. It doesn't mean anything. It's just people trying to put labels on a very specific change that has gone on in human behavior, which technology has managed to match, right? If you don't have the two matching, there are so many eras in history where the technology was clearly available and clearly worked, but the behavior wasn't there yet. And so it just didn't match. You need, in order to have a Skype or in order to have a Facebook, you need behavior and you need technological implementation. Without the two, you get Friendster. for those of you that remember. So now, we're at this sort of place where people are kind of a little bit wigged out about social media, and they tend to focus a little bit too much on the wrong questions. They tend to focus a lot on the how. And by the way, you're going to hear two very excellent presentations today about the how you do it, how you engage in it, what are the sort of ins and outs of engaging in both SEO, SEM, social media, the sort of take you want to walk away with the hardcore question that every business person wants to know, which is, how do I do this? How do I engage?